So good afternoon to everyone and welcome to today's virtual design review panel meeting. This is the first item on today's agenda. I'm Joe Bordeloni, host of this meeting, but panel member David Clucio will be the chair. In addition to the panel members, we have the applicant team, city staff, members of the public, and media observing this meeting. Members of the public are welcome to observe the meeting only. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the DRP webpage. Just a reminder to please keep your microphones muted if you are not speaking. Thank you, and David, please begin the meeting.
Good afternoon and welcome. Joe, can you please confirm this session is being recorded?
It is.
And are there any changes to the agenda today?
Nope.
I don't believe there's any conflicts with any of the panel members, but if there are, please speak up. Otherwise, I'll proceed. The first item on the agenda today is the review of 200 Centennial Parkway North. The lead planner in the file is Daniel Barnett. Good afternoon, Daniel. Ready for your presentation. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes.
Good afternoon. Oops, might help if I share my screen. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep, you're all good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good afternoon. Yes, this is a design review panel meeting respecting the property at 200 Centennial Parkway North. The proposed development is for Centennial Parkway North, located on the east side of Centennial Parkway North, south of Barton Street. The proposal is for a multi-tower development consisting of a 20-story, 15-story, 9-story, 16-story, 12-story, and 9-story towers with a total of 1,150 dwelling units, 5 commercial units, and 844 parking spaces. So this is the subject lands. The development is focused on the south portion of the existing plaza. The remaining lands to the north on the plaza would remain as is. The lands to the west are existing commercial uses. The lands to the to the east are existing multiple dwellings as well as existing townhouses, and the lands to the south are existing townhouses. This is a view of the subject property as seen from Centennial Parkway North looking east. This is the balance of the land, so the rest of the commercial plaza, again, as seen from Centennial Parkway North looking northeast. This is a view of the existing commercial uses located in the northwest of the subject property on the west side of Centennial Parkway North, again, seen from Centennial Parkway North looking northwest. This is a view of the existing commercial uses located to the west of the subject property on the west side of Centennial Parkway North, again, as seen from Centennial Parkway North looking southwest. So this is a view of the existing townhouses to the south. This is seen from Centennial Parkway North looking east. This is a view of the existing townhouses to the south of the subject property. This is a view from Violet Drive looking north. This is a view of some additional townhouses also to the south of the subject lands, again seen from Violet Drive looking north. This is a view of the existing townhouses that are located to the east of the subject lands, as seen from Bar Lake Avenue looking southwest. And this is a view of the existing multiple dwellings located to the east of the subject property, again seen from Bar Lake Avenue looking northeast. So this is a view of the site plan with the 20-story, 15-story, 9-story, 9-story, 16-story, and 12-story towers. This is a ground floor layout with the 5 commercial uses and then entrances for the various towers located in these locations. This is a south elevation plan of the proposed development. This is a north elevation plan of the proposed development. This is the interior north and south elevations of between the 2 towers at phase 1, which is the development at the front. This is the east and west elevations, again for that phase 1A development at the front. This is the side elevations of the kind of the two 9-story buildings in the kind of middle of the development, phase 1B and 2B. This is the interior south and interior north elevations for the phase 2A land, which is the development, the 16 and 12-story buildings at the back. This is the east and west elevation for the, again, the phase 2 development, 2A development. This is a rendering of the proposed building. This is the westerly perspective along Centennial Parkway North. This is a rendering of the proposed building for the northwest perspective. This is a rendering of the proposed development from the southwest perspective, showing it in the front and then the southerly side of the building. This is a rendering from the southerly perspective, so kind of looking over the townhouses towards the proposed development. This is from the north, looking from the balance of the commercial lands, looking onto the development. Oops, sorry, went wrong way. And this is a rendering from the southeast perspective, from the rear and the south sides of the building. So the subject property is identified in the Urban Hamilton official plan as being a secondary corridor. It is designated in the official plan as being mixed use, high density. Major policy themes: secondary corridors serve as a link, serve to link nodes and employment areas of primary corridors. Urban corridors shall function as a commercial spine, providing retail and commercial services that cater primarily to the weekly and daily needs of residents in the area. A built form along the urban corridor shall generally consist of low to mid-rise forms, but will vary along the length of the corridor, with some areas permitted to accommodate higher density and higher rise built form. The intent is to evolve the secondary corridors to an increase proportion of multiple story, multiple use buildings in clusters located with at-grade retail and service commercial. New development shall respect the existing built form of the adjacent neighborhood where appropriate by providing gradation in building height. In terms of mixed use medium density, it permits a range of uses, including multiple dwellings and commercial uses. Mixed use high density shall contain a range of building heights and densities. Secondary plan shall provide greater direction in respect to use, height, density, built form, and and design, and shall establish a minimum density of commercial, residential, and mixed use buildings. Mixed use high density areas are intended to develop in a compact urban form with a streetscape design and a building arrangement supporting pedestrian use and circulation and the creation of a vibrant people place. Applications for new development shall demonstrate how the policies for a pedestrian-focused street and create a vibrant people place are being achieved. New development shall respect the existing built form of adjacent neighborhoods by providing a gradation in building height and density, and by locating and designing new buildings to minimize the effect of shadowing and overview on properties in adjacent neighborhoods. Residential intensification developments, the residential relationship of the proposed to the existing neighborhood character so that it maintains and enhances desirable established patterns and built forms. The compatible integration of the development with the surrounding area in terms of use, scale, form, and character. In terms of urban design goals, is to create pedestrian-oriented places that are safe, accessible, connected, and easy to navigate for people of all abilities. Organizing space in a logical manner through the design, placement, and construction of new buildings, creating a continuous animated street edge in urban environments, providing a connection and access to all buildings and places for all users, regardless of age and physical ability. Ensuring building entrances are visible from the street and promoting shelter at entranceways. Creating places and spaces which are publicly visible and safe. Complementing the existing massing patterns, rhythm, character, color, and surrounding context. In terms of built form, new development shall minimize impacts on neighboring buildings and public spaces by creating transition and scale to neighboring buildings, ensuring adequate privacy and sunlight to neighboring properties, minimize impact of shadowing and wind conditions. New development shall be massed to respect existing and planned street proportions, create a comfortable pedestrian environment by locating principal facades and primary building entrances close to the street as possible, including ample glazing on the ground floors, including quality landscape edge along frontages, locating surface parking to the side and rear of sites, and using design techniques such as step backs. So in terms of the secondary plan, the property is located within the Centennial Neighborhood Secondary Plan and is designated in the secondary plan as a mixed-use high density and also a pedestrian-focused street. In terms of maximum building height in the secondary plan, it is identified as having a maximum building height of 15 stories. The property is located along Centennial Parkway, which is a streetscape improvement area in the secondary plan. And the property is located adjacent to low-rise residential. There's townhouses to the south and to the east, and therefore the southerly part of the property is a neighborhood transition area. In terms of land use in the secondary plan, the property is designated mixed-use high density, which permits a range of different uses, including a mixed-use development. In terms of height and density, as mentioned, a maximum height of 15 stories. However, there is a provision that allows additional height up to a maximum of 5 additional stories is permitted without modifying the secondary plan. A minimum density of 100 units per hectare or greater is required. Urban design policies require ensuring compatibility between the areas of different land uses, densities, and heights. Ensuring design promotes pedestrian walkability, cycling, physical activity, social interactions, and public gathering spaces. Ensure appropriate transition between different building heights and uses. In terms of pedestrian-focused streets, a minimum height of 2 stories is required. Pedestrian-focused streets shall be a focus of retail activity and shall provide pedestrian-oriented design at grade along the streets. New buildings shall be built close to the street to provide street presence and enclosure. Building entrances shall be emphasized as a focal point of a building facade and be placed in highly visible locations where they provide opportunities to animate the street. Where multiple buildings are located on a single site, buildings may be located in the interior of the site as long as the development provides an adequate block face along the pedestrian-focused street. In terms of street improvement areas, areas within the private realm, within the private realm shall be provided as part of the development. In terms of neighborhood transition, where lands designated mixed use, high density, abut low or medium density residential uses or other sensitive land uses, development shall respect the character of the existing built form of these areas by providing appropriate transition in scale and height between the proposed development and adjacent neighborhoods. Proposals for development shall demonstrate transition to existing residential. Development shall use various transition elements, including landscape buffers, fencing, trees, setbacks, massing, scale, or other built form considerations, or a combination thereof, to minimize the impact of high density development or mixed use development on adjacent existing uses. All development shall provide appropriate screening between the existing sensitive land use and commercial uses, mixed uses, and parking areas. In terms of zoning, the existing property is zoned to G1 site-specific 635 zone. So that's the
I hope you're reaching the end of your
I'm almost done, yeah.
session.
Yeah. The property is zoned designated shopping centers, G1 site-specific zone, which permits a range of commercial uses but does not permit a multiple dwelling. The maximum height of the current zoning is 3 stories or 14 meters. Requires a parking requirement of 1.25 spaces per dwelling unit, which is roughly 1,438 parking spaces. For the residential uses, in terms of commercial, that would vary depending on what kind of commercial uses they're proposing. And in terms of specific areas of discussion, does the proposal represent compatible integration with the surrounding area in terms of use, scale, form, and character? Does the proposal create a continuous animated street edge? Does the proposal create pedestrian-oriented places that are safe, accessible, connected, and easy to navigate for people of all abilities? That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Daniel. I turn it over to the consultant to provide you additional information. Please keep the presentation under 10 minutes.
Thanks, David. I'll speak quickly for you and welcome any questions. So Chamberlain's office is going to bring up the presentation to share. My name is Sarah Knoll, and I'm a planner with GSP Group. I am here with Miss Amanda Ireland, Vice President, Residential Development from Smart Centers, Mr. John McGinn, Executive Vice President from Chamberlain Architects, and we also have Jazz from GSP to respond to urban design comments as well. So for slide 2, the site is highlighted in red, 2.45 hectares in area, representing 45% of the overall site. The northern portion outside of the proposal is subject to long-term leases and no build agreements and is therefore not a candidate for redevelopment. Centennial Parkway North is classified as a major arterial road and Barton Street East is a minor arterial. Centennial is currently a commercial spine running north-south. The proposal is in a location with excellent existing and planned transit, including 3 HSR routes as well as a GO bus route. Considered together, these routes provide an overall site with good local and regional transit service. The proposal is also located within 800 meters of 2 major transit stations, including the proposed LRT terminus station at Eastgate Square to the south, identified with the blue icon, and the planned transit service at the Centennial GO station, identified with the green icon. The character of the area is generally mixed and includes townhouses, mid-rise and high-rise buildings, and automotive-oriented commercial plazas. There does not appear to be any new or modern buildings within the surrounding area. So slide 3 is the overall site showing in the red, and it's surrounded by a mix of uses with commercial uses located to the west, employment uses to the north, and residential uses located to the south and the east. Of these surrounding residential uses, there is a significant variety in heights, including low-rise townhomes, mid-rise apartment buildings, and slab high-rise apartment buildings. From a land use perspective, the proposed mixed-use development is compatible with the surrounding commercial and residential land uses. So slide 4 shows the proposal. Then it's for 2 buildings consisting of 6 tower heights, as Daniel mentioned, of 20, 15, 9, 9, 16, and 12 stories, from the west to the east or from the right of this rendering to the left. 1,150 units and 1,359.2 square meters of gross floor area of commercial are proposed within these buildings. Internal and external amenity is provided at grade and above grade. Bicycle parking is also provided with long-term locations for residents and short-term for visitors to the commercial and residential. So slide 5 shows that the site is within the most recent secondary plan approved by the City of Hamilton. The building complies with the secondary plan policies and is implementing the city's vision for the area, namely that the site is within the sub-regional service node, one of 2 designated nodes within the entire City of Hamilton, which is to accommodate a significant portion of the citywide residential intensification. An official plan amendment is not required. So the application that's been submitted to the city is for a zoning bylaw amendment to incorporate the proposed development into the Hamilton zoning bylaw 05200, the new City of Hamilton zoning bylaw. The amendment requests are to increase to the 20-story height limit as permitted in the secondary plan, to request that no parking be provided for the retail spaces, supported by a parking study and acknowledgement of the vast surface parking that's currently on the site, and to remove the maximum building setback to the local street adjacent to Phase 2A, which is Bar Lake Avenue, to allow for an ample yard setback, and to pull the building to the Centennial Parkway North frontage. Slide 6 is an overview of the development, and it is phased. Phase 1, as shown here, is the first mixed-use component, will require the demolition of 4 retail units. 1 is currently vacant. The existing drive aisle to the south will remain and provide access to the proposed development, but mainly for the existing commercial uses. So if you can click to Phase 1B, this is the residential component and will require the demolition of the remaining existing retail spaces along the western limit, consisting of 2 retail units. And clicking to Phase 2, this is the start of Phase 2, and the southern drive aisle will be removed and replaced with landscaping. Phase 2A is the second mixed-use component, and it will require the demolition of a portion of the existing retail space. And then clicking through to the final phase, Phase 2B mirrors Phase 1B. And John, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm John from Chamberlain Architects. So this slide demonstrates some of the massing and arrangements of massing along the site. So the built-out project, including Phase 1 through 2A, we are running townhouses fronting the adjacent towns along the southern property line. We have street-facing retail along Centennial that wraps onto the northern section in the existing retail area. As we move up to the podium section of the building, we've got parking internally that's wrapped with units. And then as we move up into the upper floors, we have the tower portions, which are the residential sections. All buildings are making use of the rooftop areas above the parking areas for green roofs, along with at-grade green space. As you'll see, and you've kind of seen in some of the site plans previously, There's a large green space buffer between the existing towns to the south and the proposed development. And really that's to kind of help with some of the transition points and, you know, compatibility with development of the existing character of the neighborhood. This is a reverse side, so this is a view from the northwest side, similar graphic, kind of showing the allocation of the massings on the buildings, retail on the lower level, the mixed parking and units on the podium, and then the tower sections above. These graphics also nicely show the step down from the northern portion towers down to the southern portion towers on the site. The next graphic, this is the site plan or ground floor plan. I'm going to flip quickly to the second slide, which shows the different circulation patterns. So it's important that this development, you know, interacts well with its surroundings. So this is kind of showing the different vehicular access and parking, which is all concealed inside the building. As you can see, the red arrows are showing the vehicular access, service access, and then all of our internal parking. The blue arrows are showing all of the pedestrian paths in and around the site, which are pretty straightforward. You know, certainly are showing as linear now, but will be enhanced with landscaping as we move along. This allows, you know, easy accessibility for all uses and also kind of promotes a safe environment and a nice open environment. With residential units at all levels, it also helps to improve the safety of the development. We go into the next slide. This is a slide that demonstrates the transition that the project has gone through from our original PAC meeting. At the original time, we had a 26-story tower along the street edge, which we've kind of massaged contextually over the process, introducing setbacks, step backs, and transitions along angular planes. This slide really starts to show the contextual relationship between the existing retail plaza and Centennial Road. It identifies an active base with retail wrapping the corners, the two-story towns on the southwest facade, which wrap around to the south facade. It shows the stepping and terracing of the facades along Centennial, demonstrates undulation in the massing of the building by breaking up the facades, transitioning materials from higher to lower to create less linear mass. The slide also illustrates the materiality of the building. So more transitional residential materials on the base, you know, solids with prescribed openings, then transitioning up the building and dissipating the solids as we move to the lighter colors up the facades. This slide demonstrates the stepping of the towers down to the south. You can see from the left-hand side, we've got our tallest tower at 20 stories stepping down along the way. It also shows the slenderness of the towers. The facades emphasized with the integration of the surrounding areas and the activation of the Centennial facade. This particular facade has townhouse access, residential lobby access, along with retail access. Go on to the next slide. This slide demonstrates the massing of the development and articulation of the massing, moving from the higher mass along Centennial down as we move across the development. The slide also shows the interactions of the phases of the project, which will be providing a full construction management plan to address. This particular view is from the southeast side of the site. This shows the spacious green space that separates between the proposed development and the adjacent uses. Being a North Place development, this will remove all shadows from the south townhouse lands. We also added at the base of the buildings two-story town units to better integrate with the existing towns, and we can see the landscape area as a real benefit to the development and its surroundings, providing a safe space that is easily accessible for all patrons. This particular slide shows some sample context imagery, different things that we see happening on the site as we start to develop further along. You know, it's a collection of active images at street levels and different activity places, from the retail spaces to the green spaces at grade, along with the green spaces at the roof. Let's see here, and that's it. We're just under our time here. We'll open up the floor to any questions.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll turn it over to Iana if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. If all parking is located in the above ground podiums? That was one. I didn't see any plans for underground, so I just wanted to confirm that.
Correct.
Yes. Okay. And the other one was there any reason why not to connect to Bark Lake Avenue?
There was. It's
Go ahead,
a
Sarah.
local. Sorry, John. It's a local road at the rear, and we wanted to keep the access points out to the major and minor arterial roads.
But it is a public road, right?
It is, yes, a public local road, correct.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Joey?
Thanks, David. I have a few questions. First one is, was there a document and salvage report that was required for this project?
No, there was not.
Demolition? There's not. Okay. What are the proposed units per acre? Hectare, I'm sorry, Hectare.
I have that in my planning justification report that was submitted. So density per hectare once full build out. If it's just on the developable area, that's 469.3 units per hectare. Across the entire site, it's 213 units per hectare.
Okay. Okay. Well, that leads into my next and final question. Is there, and I appreciate seeing the master plan of for this project, or sorry, the phasing for this project, but is there a larger master plan for the entire site with the understanding that the applicant owns the larger block or portion of this block?
That's right. So Andrea can probably add to that, but there is a no build because they are retail units. They appreciate the frontage, exposed frontage onto those major roads. And so I believe it's a no build, no development clause in the remainder of the site. But Andrea, you can add to that.
Yeah, correct. Thanks, Sarah. We have the intensification plan for this property is only on the southern 6 acres. The balance of the property has all of our tenants have long-term leases in place, and we actually have no build agreements as part of those leases, so we cannot touch the parking field.
So the no build is an agreement with the city or with your tenants?
With our tenants, but we've committed to the city that we will not be coming in for redevelopment with a master plan on the northern lands.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Dana? Is Dana able to ask questions? Or is Dana on the call? If Dana's not there, Jennifer's.
Yeah, sorry, David, she doesn't look like she's on the call.
Yeah, Jennifer Sison.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Daniel, Sarah, and John for your presentations. I've got about 4 questions. One, I may have missed this. How long-term are the leases? Like, when do those expire?
We have leases into well into the future. So many of our leases expire in the early 2030s, and there are extensions as part of those leases. So many in excess of 40 or 50 years.
Okay, good to know. Thanks. I noticed the access lanes, they terminate at the south end. I was wondering if that's just required for turnaround or if there was any intent to create a road at the south end or a paved area down there.
No, that's just for internal servicing, garbage pickup and loading.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers another one of my questions. And I noticed in the landscape board, you were showing a series of models, but it also notes that they're all precedents and they're subject to change. Is there any intent to implement these, or is the design here still in flux for the landscape?
Our wish is to submit a more detailed landscape plan as part of our SPA application. So we're still evolving those plans.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thanks, David. I have one question for Daniel. I understand there's a minimum density of 100 units per hectare. Is there a maximum? Or is the city leaving that open?
Yeah, I didn't. In my review, I don't recall seeing a maximum. Maybe I maybe I missed it, but I don't recall seeing it. I saw a minimum not a maximum.
Maybe Smart Centers, could you elaborate on that? Are you working with a maximum number?
We are not. So supporting the density number, you're correct that there is a minimum. The maximum is contributed to all the supporting studies that we have and the design elements that support the number that we're proposing.
Okay, thank you.
Eldon.
Thanks, David. Just two questions of clarity, and perhaps I missed this in the presentation. Could you confirm how many bicycle parking spaces are being provided?
The slides here. So 402 long-term and 30 short-term.
Thank you. And then in terms of the 20, 15, and 16-story components, and perhaps I missed as well, but could you confirm the floor plate size of those towers?
Yeah, let me grab that number. Mo, if you're on there, if you could just send me the number. So I've got my screen up here. I can't flip through the drawings.
Actually
Get
have
that
it.
from you,
I measured it
yeah.
off your plans. I think it's about 1,000 meters square or in excess of that for all of the towers.
So the floor plate changes, but for the upper floors, it's just over 1,000 square meters. For the floors between 15 to 20, it's just over the 1,000 square meters.
Thanks, Mo.
And I guess just further to that question, and I know you had mentioned in the beginning of your presentation that you had a pre-consultation with city staff, and in that initial presentation, I saw that the design showed, I think, some 26-story tower components. Is this, I guess, revised design a response to? I'm assuming it was to bring down the height. Is this tower a response to addressing those pre-consultation comments?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Ted?
I guess my first question, and I may have missed this, and I couldn't figure it out from the documentation, but what, and this is a question to the city, what is the allowable density on this site, and what is this proposal putting forward?
So I think the question already came up about what the maximum density is. There's a minimum density in the secondary plan, but there isn't a maximum density.
So there's I guess what we're trying to figure out is what is the basis for comparing the level of density that's being shown on the site right now. There's no limit? There's no maximum limit of density on the site from a zoning perspective?
Well, there is restrictions. Obviously, the current zoning doesn't reflect obviously the secondary plan. The current G1 zone doesn't reflect the secondary plan because it only permits a maximum height of three stories. But in terms of, and that's why they're going through the rezoning process. So there would be obviously restrictions put in through that rezoning process to kind of facilitate the proposed development. But in terms of height, I mean, height is definitely controlled in the secondary plan. It says 15. You can go up to a maximum of 20 or additional 5. But beyond that, the secondary plan does not put a maximum unit cap or maximum density cap.
And Ted, if I could add to that too. So the site is within the sub-regional service node, which is one sub-regional service node of 2 within the entire city of Hamilton. And this is where the city has asked for the focus, other than downtown, the focus of the significant portion of the residential intensification. And this secondary planning was approved in 2018, appealed for approval of 2019 to establish this secondary planning in this area for increased heights and only limiting the minimum density.
A question I have regarding the architectural documentation. In the renderings, we're seeing a very articulated kind of masonry cubic structure at the middle tower, and we're seeing canopies and overhangs. And then when we look on the building plans, we don't see any of that articulation or detailing in a way that gives us confidence or allows us to understand what those canopy depths are. There's no sections provided either. So my question is, should we be responding to the renderings or the plans? I'm assuming it's the renderings, but I'd like to know that the design that we're seeing in the renderings is what's being committed to.
I'd have to take a look. The renderings are generated from the plans. Everything's drawn in 3D, so I'm guessing it's a graphical issue. All of the plans do reflect or should reflect the renderings.
And my last question is what is the proposal for level 6? There's a significant amount of rooftop space that's captured within inside courtyards of these spaces, and the landscape plan indicates there may be some development. Can you articulate on what that is? Those levels?
Correct. That'll be a collection of both intensive and extensive green roof areas for patron use.
So those are habitable areas for the residents to use as amenity space?
Correct.
Thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you.
I don't have any questions myself that haven't been answered, so I'm going to turn it over to the panel to provide commentary. And I think the first individual is Jana.
Thank you. So I think that intensifying underutilized mall sites is a really great idea. And there are some really great examples in GTA of good mall redevelopments, which are usually based on a very thorough master plans with thoughtful structure in mind. And to me, that's the missing piece in this proposal, despite the long-term leases mentioned. It seems like an extreme density for this site, and I think that for such a large site, with this density, some comprehensive plan with reasonable structure should be proposed. Such density should be accessed better than through just one private driveway shared with a commercial property next door. I would suggest that you need a better structure, including public streets connecting to the adjacent street network. I'm not sure how the visitors would navigate here. I'm not sure about the ease of movement, the legible entrances, good pathways, especially on the east side. I do very much appreciate that you are screening the parking podium with residential uses, but the parking podiums are very extensive. And I would strongly suggest to locate at least some parking to the underground to provide some open areas at the grade. Some of the setbacks on to the adjacent properties on the south and some of the proposed separation distances, I really appreciate that you put some effort into thinking about those. But I do struggle with the overall massing, and the tower floor plates are just really, really extensive. The city has guidelines suggesting 750 meter square floor plates. These are generally the industry standards, so I really think that they shouldn't be ignored. The tall portions are way too large. I really like that you are showing them as very light with all of the glass and the sky reflections in that glass, but to me, they will still read as a large mass, which it is. And it's also very clear that this development will significantly overshadow the existing apartments on the east side. So slimmer build form to create faster moving shadows should be proposed also from that point of view. And last one is a minor point at this time. I really think that this should be redesigned completely. I like the simple design, and it would likely work for a smaller build form, but for such an extensive development, I just would suggest proposing more variety, not having all the buildings of the same design. And if you do continue with the same design, at least a variety of patterns and materials and colors to be considered. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jana. Joey?
Thanks, David. Thank you again for your presentation. I think just to start off, I'd like to recommend to staff that the document and salvage report is required for this project. There's quite a bit of demolition that's happening. I understand it's not kind of historic or heritage, but there's quite a bit of material that'll be going away here, and maybe there's an opportunity to salvage or for reuse for another project. So I mean, this project's precedent setting, not only for the neighborhood, but I also think for the applicant here. There are an abundance of smart centers throughout Amanda, is it Canada, North America? You're all over the place, and there are also large sites that are owned by the applicant. If this is an approach that is going to happen over time, then I think it has to be understood as part of the larger property. And I think what we're seeing here is that there's a lot of density built up in one area where the density can really be distributed throughout the site. I don't have an issue with the approach here and how things are sort of laid out and the kind of the urban intensity of the project. But I do think if it is distributed throughout the site, that it would work a lot better and could be a very kind of progressive and positive precedent-setting project for the neighborhood. So I think that's the real missed opportunity. I understand there are tenants in place and you're juggling a lot, but 40 to 50 years seems really long. I mean, typical leases are 5 to 10, but I think there's an opportunity here to also work with the tenants and potentially have them find their ways, at the retail level of these buildings, not only in the short term, but also in a potential long-term phasing. So I think the real issue with the site proper, just getting back to that, is the transition and scale. I also have a bit of an issue with the way that the architects have presented these drawings. I think they are a little bit too curated. I think Ted brought it up in his question. We're not seeing sections. We're not seeing the real relationship between the townhomes in behind and what is proposed here. I think the renderings are misleading. If we can go back to the rendering that shows the view from the townhomes, I think that the scaling is not correct. Here, right here, those townhomes look quite large and those buildings look tiny. We're talking about 3 stories versus 20. I don't think we're reading this the right way, but I do think a very simple 2D section would give us a very good understanding of what the relationship is between these buildings. And then the 45-degree sight lines section drawing of that would be helpful as well. That's it for me. Thank you.
Jennifer Sison.
Thanks, David. So I'd echo both Jana and Joey. I do appreciate that you've converted what is currently surface parking to residential and retail uses, but consideration of the full site is really necessary, whether that be 50 years in the future or 10 if the leases aren't extended. I think there's a bit of a missed opportunity too here, not repeating what people have said before, just a couple of new points. That you haven't connected at all to Bar Lake Avenue, and there is an opportunity to match with Eastgate Crescent on the west side. This would help to provide a bit more of a typical connected grid layout for the streets and open up more frontages. I also find kind of lacking detail for the proposed amenity spaces, so it's a bit hard to review those. In the building renders, you've shown kind of a very thin linear arrangement of trees at the south end, which really isn't contributing much in terms of thoughtful programmable space. I think looking at maybe a linear park in this area could really help the site. It would support the users and also help to buffer those residential uses to the south. Notwithstanding that, I also agree with Joey that the massing needs to be kind of reconsidered at this edge. In terms of cycling circulation and pedestrian circulation, I would like to see actual bike lanes and path widths at the south and east sides that are supportive of walking and cycling combined, or some separated facilities to show that there's some thoughtfulness to connections around the site as well as to surrounding neighborhoods. I think both the cycling and pedestrian circulation needs a bit more connectivity, particularly to Bar Lake, and reconsideration of the south end of the site where the sidewalk crosses the driveway turnaround for vehicles in particular should be reconsidered, because that could cause conflicts. I appreciate the provision of the promenade or the pedestrian connection, but I do encourage you to maybe consider moving retail uses to this space. Spaces like these really need active uses and a high level of maintenance to keep them safe and comfortable, and active uses would help to promote that. You've created a bit of a wind tunnel here as well, which could be a bit of an issue. It's not going to be comfortable, particularly in the winter. It's not going to support seating in the summer, whether that's a resident or a patio. And you may want to consider some architectural changes or landscape features that could improve this and soften that wind that's coming through there. In terms of the building massing, I do find the floor plate of the towers to be too large. They're all over 1,000 meters square, which exceeds the tall building guideline, which is 750 meters square. And podiums above the 6 stories, they're really intended to only be that 750 meters square with a setback of 25 meters between them. So you kind of created this hybrid of podium towers of 8 to 16 stories, which doesn't really work in my opinion. I think anything you show above 6 stories is really a tower, and it should respect those floor plates and setbacks outlined in the tall building guidelines. There's also not really enough space between the central towers, so those phase 1B and 2B, and the adjacent east and westmost towers, so the ones outside of them. You're only showing about 20 meters, and we should really have 25 between them. But I do agree overall the height may be appropriate to this area because of the considered future development through the secondary plan, but I just don't find it to be justified by what we see today. Overall, I'd appreciate a bit more thought into how the building relates to adjacent uses and how it contributes to the public realm. I think this is really needed to make this the precedent-setting building that it's going to become for the area. Thank you very much.
Jennifer Mallard.
Thanks, David. I agree with my fellow panelists about concerns about density. And Jen's comments in detail there about tall building guidelines and separation of towers. I'm not going to repeat that, but I completely support her comments. You've asked, I think, for 3 relatively simple relaxations: a setback at Bar Lake Avenue, a request to go to 20 stories, and a parking relaxation because for retail, because the parking is provided by the other half of the lot. I have no problem with those relaxations, but I do have an issue with the density. And there's the view from the parking lot looking at the, what is that, the north elevation of the development. And I think the building just, it looks like one building and one urban wall. And I think you need some greater articulation between the pieces so it doesn't seem like an urban wall. I think the horizontal stratification, you've got the dark at the base, the white mid layer, and the dark window wall at the top. I think that actually adds to it being like a wall, and it feels oppressive to me. Generally, lighter colors against the sky will disappear more, so I would support flipping the colors so that the white or light color is higher up and the darker colors are at the base. I noticed your mechanical units at the top are dark, and it just feels oppressive and heavy. So I support densification and applaud you for working with the whole site, but I think a greater site integration is needed, and the densification is just, it's pushing it too hard, too much. Thank you.
Eldon.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm going to try not to repeat a lot of my colleagues have noted. Just going to focus on a couple of points. And just as a point of clarity, I do understand as it relates to long-term leases, they are common. They do create, conflicts as it relates to redevelopment. And I know that leases up to 100 years are not uncommon. So I appreciate that conflict that you're working with. And I also recognize that, there's no maximum density here. But what I find as it relates to this proposal is that the built form, the expression of this built form, appears to be squat and elongated in its, in its deployment. And I'm thinking that flows out of your pre-consultation and trying to respond to and/or trying to limit the amount of relief that you require in order to achieve this development. But I think that outcome is due to a combination of both these tall slab towers, as mentioned previously, as well as having these parking podiums that create this large base at the bottom of the buildings. I think consideration for I actually think that taller, slender towers make more sense along this corridor. I know this corridor is desperate for transformation, and an opportunity like this is one of the locations where this could happen. I think a slender expression of built form would be more appropriate, in combination with the consideration of some underground parking. And I think when you consider both of those together, you're able to provide more focus on the experience at the ground level, the experience at the street, the experience for the pedestrian, where a lot of placemaking is intended to occur. Right now, as it sits, the building overall reads very monotonous in terms of this continuity of architectural expression along all the frontages. It just reads massive, and it benefits from some finer grain implementation of place. If you think about this site, you got almost 1,200 units. It's a small community. So there's an opportunity to really do something special here. Thinking about how this is built around the open spaces that promote congregation, even being able to provide, this committee with a conceptual landscape plan that shows that ideas, giving each of these buildings their own individuality of architectural expression, thinking about opportunities for greater porosity through this overall, future created block. And even having, while there's a private street network, thinking about having a more formalized streetscape design that reflects the grandeur of this type of development. I think all of these pieces speak to the need to really kind of take a step back and look at, how can we really create a sense of place with this site? How can we really create something a little more intimate while still achieving that level of density that you're seeking on this site? Those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Ted. Or sorry, Ted is next. Thanks, Eldon.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. And again, I won't. I agree with what's being said here. And I would suggest that we do appreciate the efforts to articulate the design. You can tell that there was a lot of thought put into how to create differentiation within the different stratifications of this building design, and generally support the approach to density in this site. Agree that it should be a dense urban condition, and appreciate the treatment of the ground plane as in real retail and townhouses, and the concealment in general of the parking. Having said that, I think there's a fundamental challenge here in that this design is not considering how it integrates into the existing city. How is this project, which is such a major landmark and initiator of regeneration in this site, how is it connecting into the existing networks of roadway systems and park systems, and how is it planning for that future? So I think it could benefit from just stepping back and trying to look at what's around it, which is a lot of 70s developments, which were, based on the tower and the park concept. So we've learned from that, and that in here is that retail comes to the street and there's a street walls, which is great. But what's been lost is the access to light and daylight and the open park space that is in these surrounding neighborhoods. I think also the treatment of the architecture also suffers from the similar monolithic, or the scale that is can be dehumanizing. So while there's craft and thought put into the articulation of the architecture, the scale of it just simply limits the welcomingness and the generosity that this site really deserves. I would say that in terms of the documentation that we received, having a complete landscape plan that actually gives us information that we can evaluate, having complete sectional and architectural information that allows us to be confident that what we're seeing is what is actually being put forward, and also understanding where the residential amenities for this building reside. What are the amenities that this building is providing to its residents? I think that is lacking, is missing from this application, and as perhaps a note to the city that these applications should not be brought forward if they don't contain that information, because the DRP will only see this project once, and we cannot assess its merits if we don't have that information. Having said that, the density of this project is problematic. I think if phase 1B were to disappear and become a park space that really connects north-south, and you start to break up the monolithic massing of this entire block. And I think it's something of that nature that needs to be considered here for this to be successful. Thank you for your application.
Thank you. I think a lot of things have been stated already that I agree with in terms of both the positive aspects of the project. I mean, I think there's some good work that's gone into this. I think in general we do see some value in density on the site, as many have said, but in general it's just too extreme. I just want to return to the issue of the overall site. I know the conversation about the long-term leases is maybe tying your hands to looking at the bigger picture, but I think that I would advocate that this area of the city warrants some long vision, and you as a significant landowner in this, and a sophisticated developer, I think that there is an opportunity here that I would really think you would be worth going back. I can imagine that if you can reach some agreement to do some kind of musical chairs on the site with these long-term leases, to put them in new space in some kind of new development, that you might be able to unlock the design potential of the whole site and really do something fabulous for Hamilton in this area, and also realize even more significant value for yourself if there was a way to overcome this log jam. And I think that would also maybe release some of the pressure that this site is facing in terms of the density that's being squeezed into it. Because I do believe, as the other panelists have said, that you've gone beyond the point where you're really creating a positive environment, that this is, there is you're sacrificing quality of community here for the density that you're placing on the site. It really is, you know, a little too dense in such a small area. And as Ted just said, if you could, you know, move some of that density out and create a little bit more of at ground generosity, I think that would really be a big plus to the project. I share some of the concerns of the kind of franticness of the architectural treatment of it, and whether or not, well, you know, with a multi building complex like this, certainly some advantage in spending some effort on, as you have, in terms of trying to create a rich facade treatment. I'm not sure that the strategy that you've exercised has actually, you know, borne this as successful the solution as you may be aiming for. I also agree that the public realm, as I mean, we can look at the precedent images and imagine something that might be, you know, wonderful there, but right now the drawings as they are presented don't really, you know, back that up. I think there are issues with the transition to the smaller townhouses, and again, because of the fact that you're squeezing the development potential onto just this portion, the opportunity to knit the fabric of the city through bringing, I think it's called Bark Lake Road and Eastgate, I guess, or is on the other side of the street. There, it's the present site interrupts the continuity of the fabric, and there was an opportunity that this overall site development could achieve through, you know, a bigger vision. I mean, there are you know, looking at the scheme in a little, you know, more granular level, I'm not convinced that the entrances, particularly in the phase one to the two towers, are really served well by the symmetrical placement in the ground floor. I think that you really should be looking at separate entrances that are more connected to the eventual location where the elevator cores are. One probably for the northern taller tower that is addressed directly off of the internal street. I mean, if we think of that as an internal street, some of the rules that apply in terms of the, you know, the angular planes that would be going from that internal street obviously are not being met. If you think of it as a true, you know, public street, which in fact, in many ways, it serves as the entrance to all of these, you know, the majority of the towers. I think that well, I guess I'm not understanding why you wouldn't look at the Bark Lake as an opportunity to, you know, connect even right now with the site. As it is, like, you're so close to being able to make that connection. And also, even at the pedestrian level, the way it's laid out, there are numerous areas where connectivity could occur into the adjacent properties that are even being able to connect a sidewalk through to Bark Lake, even if you're not putting vehicles, is not illustrated within the project. I'm not totally convinced about the positioning of the townhouse units facing right onto Centennial, and maybe by rearranging that facade or increasing the retail along that facing, that would maybe be these are very nuanced comments that I have. There are some comments about wind conditions in the report that I'm not sure I fully understand in detail what they are, but I think, again, the sort of, in this view that you have on right now, the sort of superficial color change between the upper and the lower portions of the tower are an example that maybe if there was a little more interruption in that tower and a little more tinier tower footprints, as was mentioned earlier, relative to a more separate podium base, that might help to deal with some of the wind tunnel changes that are identified. I think the rest of the comments I have are just a reinforcement of what others have already said. So I think at this point, if you have any comments or questions, we're kind of running a little bit over here.
I don't. John, do you have any?
No, I think the only question I would have is there were some comments about height and adjustments to the height. What does the panel think about increased height along Centennial on a slender tower?
Well, I guess we'd have to poll the individual panel members, but I also agree that a slenderer tower that would allow you to have a clear, separate podium and less, like even the way the towers are positioned, essentially facing each other, creates a pretty grim internal condition. I think while you have created a rather nice gap between you and the townhouses to the north, I don't feel that you're treating your own tenants that well. And if you had smaller towers that were staggered, maybe to make up for required density, you might seek a taller footprint. That might help to alleviate some of the bulkiness and the challenges that we're seeing with the design as it stands right now. But I mean, I'll be honest with you, I really wish you guys would look at the whole site somehow, because I think that's the big opportunity here, to really think about what is the full site. What would be your dream if you didn't have those long-term tenants? How would you keep them on the site, satisfy their business requirements, but in a new location that allowed you to develop this as a real corner of the city? I think that's what I would be looking for, ideally. Any other questions? Sorry.
No, that's all I have.
And I don't know if any other panelists want to talk about the height, whether you would support more, even higher than 20 if the towers were, and maybe the podiums were lower and towers were more in line with the tall building guidelines.
I agree with that, David.
I agree as well.
I agree with slender towers. I'm just not sure if this site really needs more, or even this amount of density. Like if we are just trying to redistribute it, then yeah, sure, slender towers would be the way to go. But I really think that the site needs to be redesigned first. Then we can start thinking about where the height goes.
I agree with that. I agree with Jana.
Yeah, I think it is challenging to, like when you zoom out and look at the context, this is one little dense pocket. It's like that city outside of Hong Kong that was the densest city in the world, but it was only on one little city block surrounded by a lot of less dense. So it's a very dense precedent. Like if the rest of the city in this area eventually was this dense, and the idea that a lot of it is off essentially a private parking lot it's kind of a unfortunate development precedent. Anyway, we do have another adventure in a few minutes, so we've got to move on. But thank you for your presentation. It was fairly comprehensive and easy to understand for the most part what you were up to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.